Good morning. It is a beautiful Monday morning here in Noblesville, Indiana. It is Monday, the 25th day of August. Kristen, we are kind of getting some cooler weather here, which is so exciting. It's a gorgeous day. I'm Mayor Chris Jensen of America's hometown, Noblesville, Indiana, joined by my good friend, a true lion chaser in her own right, Kristen Boyce, the owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jensen, a lion chaser.
A
That's
lion
new.
chaser. It's good.
Right.
It's somebody whose dreams are bigger than they can even imagine. Their dreams are a bit scary. Those are true lion chasers. So we try to talk about that internally in our team about dreaming big and being a little scared of your dreams a little bit. So which actually plays right into kind of a mental health conversation, right? About
Yeah.
dreaming big and wanting more. So we are ready to kick off another edition of Mental Health Monday again on this beautiful August morning. We're going to get into dealing with stress and some things here in a little bit. But first, before we do that, we're going to go through an exercise on breathing. But I have to tell you, Kristen, I got to start my day off in an awesome way this morning over at Noblesville High School. All the guidance counselors, all the mental health team that we have invested so heavily in from a school's perspective, we're all together this morning at the high school. And I got to thank them for all the work that they are doing, boots on the ground, and talk a little bit about what we are doing here at the city level. So I know you appreciate all the work that they do every day too.
I'm so grateful for them.
Yeah,
They are critical in the mental health lives of students
yeah,
and other team members and
yeah.
faculty and staff. So,
It's incredible. I got to brag on them and all the great things that we are doing too. So that was a great way. Hey, before we get started on this conversation, though, Kristen, why don't you lead us through a little square breathing exercise?
I love the square breathing.
Mm.
I love it. My daughter was like making fun of me the other day. And then I said, but you're doing it. She goes, I am. So even if you get a little bit of, poked fun at, I'm telling you, this is incredibly effective to get back to calm and centered. So we're going to inhale through our nose for 4. We're going to hold for another 4 seconds and release slowly out our mouths for 8. And just kind of imagine you making a square in your mind. And they call it box breathing, just so you have a visual when you're doing this exercise. And the key is to get a big, deep inhale, a big belly breath on that inhale to get maximum benefit. So let's do 2 breaths together. And we're going to put our feet on the ground. So we're grounding into our present moment and into our bodies. And I recommend, if you can, go outside, put your feet in the grass. So let's take a couple of deep breaths. So big, deep inhale through your nose, hold, and a slow exhale out your mouth. Let's do one more. Yes, shoulder roll if you need to, letting go of all the tension and tightness and the stress that lives in our body and our physiology. Let's do one more. Big, deep inhale. Slow exhale out our mouths. Just kind of check in and notice the difference and how you feel. And I recommend doing 5 to 6 breaths every hour or more if you can. And especially in your drive to and from places when you're transitioning, be practicing this deep breathing because we know it's stressful with traffic, trying to get places on time. That's a perfect place to just begin being intentional about the breath.
Yes, I know you tee that up for me perfectly because I do talk about it oftentimes in the car. I know there's a lot of construction going on in Noblesville and around the world. I know this time of year, especially. And so it is a great time to practice that square breathing, especially right now. So I always tell people too, Kristen, we've been doing this for 5.5 years, which is incredible. But I said the two most poignant things I always remember is the breath and the square breathing. And that's something I would encourage any parent or leader of an organization to pass that knowledge down. We try to do that in our home. We try to do that in our workplace, to pass that knowledge down. Then I will also say you talk a lot about stress and anxiety living in the body. And I think about that oftentimes because I know it's when you're stressed and burnout, maybe that's not when you feel like you should go out and go for exercise or go for a walk. But if you can, that does help move that through. And I think about that often. So we're going to tackle conversations today around stress and burnout, which we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing burnout in the workplace. We're seeing burnout at home. Even a few short weeks into this new routine with school, you're going to see it all the time. So we're going to address that today. And I want to encourage anyone who's listening live, feel free to chime in. Charlotte, my good friend, my neighbor, already said fabulous there in the chat. Appreciate that. I see her outside actually quite often, taking her dog on a walk as well, and her pets. So she knows all about it. But feel free to say hi, or if you have any questions, chime in with those. If we don't have answers right away for you, we will get back to you. We also know that there are usually thousands of people every week that listen to it later. So feel free to drop us a note if you need to at any point in time. This is all about you and how do we support our community, not just in Noblesville, but nationwide. So, Kristen, let's dive in.
So let's talk about burnout. What is it exactly? You hear that term a lot. Have you used that a lot? Have you heard it? What have you associate with burnout?
I think a lot of it now in the workplace. Now that I'm in a role, the last couple of years, obviously as mayor, in more of a CEO executive level role, we're seeing that within our departments across the city. Burnout just in different industries, for example, that folks have been doing it. They work long hours and are starting to kind of wear thin. I think you're seeing burnout in terms of relationships too, and people may not call it burnout, but I'm at the age now where folks are in marriages after some time that are seeing some stressful moments, and you're raising kids, and you're kind of getting burnt out on each other at times. And again, that's probably not a term that's always used in a common theme, but you hear it all the time. Couples that are really working through those really challenging times, and it is a little bit of burnout. So I see it on both sides of the house, both on day-to-day basis, but also within friends and their relationships.
Yes, and caregivers. I see
Yeah,
that a lot with caregivers that are they're that sandwich generation. They're trying
yeah,
to maybe raise their teen kids or even children and take care of their parents. And so there's a lot of burnout with caregiving. So it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion due to prolonged stress. So it affects not only us mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think this is one of the things that we have to start identifying pretty early. And we go, okay, how do we identify this? The emotional signs are going to be your biggest tell and your physical signs. So the emotional signs are like irritability. Let's say you're getting short and you're normally not very short. You're irritable, you're grouchy, like people like to say. You're kind of disconnected. You're going through the motions of life, but you're not really connecting or being present in the moment. These are huge. Let's say your sleep is impacted because you're up at night worrying. Your mind won't shut off. So you're kind of thinking about your project you have at work or worrying about your elderly parent or a grandparent, and you're just not able to turn it off, and you're physically and emotionally exhausted. So exhaustion and fatigue are huge, and you really don't have a lot of joy. Like there's not a whole lot of like, yay, I have any kind of glimmer of light. It feels heavy, it feels overwhelming, and you are going to feel it in your body. We talk about how emotions live in the body. Sometimes people will get headaches. They'll start getting backaches because their shoulders will start feeling heavy, tension in your jaw. You might start getting stomach or gut issues because you're in kind of an adrenaline mode. You are constantly in a survival state. So you're trying to keep it all together, and you start taking things into your body and you're not really moving a whole lot. So you might be trying to process what you're feeling, but you don't know how. So it takes a toll on you mentally, emotionally, sometimes spiritually, and definitely physically. So it's important we start talking about this and doing check-ins, emotional check-ins with your friends, with yourself, but with your friends, with your partners, with your coworkers. How you feeling? And if you hear I'm overwhelmed, which is going to be probably the first sign, is someone's going to say, I'm so overwhelmed or I'm so stressed. Then you can say, okay, tell me more about that. What are you noticing emotionally? What's going on in your body? People don't know the language, so they don't know how to approach these conversations. It's not something we were taught. We're not like, how is that feeling in your body? That's not a question we normally ask, but getting curious. So, curiosity, we really want to hold space for curiosity when it comes to burnout and stress. The other thing is we got to name it, because this is the first, you got to have an awareness, and then we have to start naming it. Here's what I notice people do. We want to people please. We don't want to be like, are you that person that can't handle stress? We don't want to be the bad person, the bad worker, the bad caregiver, the bad daughter, the bad son, the bad, feeling like I should, We should on ourselves. I should be okay with this. So, first, it's about naming it. Second, it's about recognizing your symptoms in your body, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And then third, it's saying, okay, what needs to change? And this is hard. We've got to change something. We might need to get more rest. We might need to like do some, what we're physically able to do, some movement of some kind. Our nutrition might have taken a hike. We might have been hitting the drive-through or the Starbucks a couple times a day just to try to survive. We might need to say, okay, I'm going to need to meal prep or plan. That feels overwhelming to someone that's in burnout. So we have to take small, baby, bite sized chunks of something that we can change that feels manageable, that we're starting to kind of nurture and take care of the self that we've abandoned to kind of hustle, be on that hustle train.
So I want to dive in. I have two questions that I see on a daily basis. Let's talk a little bit about I identifying that burnout, because I think about a lot of my friends right now might be burnt out at work, but also they have kids that they're running around to 8,000 sporting events, and so you're almost like layering on
Mhm.
levels. And I guess my question is, how do I help identify, or how do I help my spouse or my friends or my coworkers identify what is that root cause of burnout? Because again, I think there's I don't know anyone who's just stressed just because of work. Usually there's layers deep on it. So I was wondering if you could kind of address that. And then I also want to circle back, and I can remind you in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about those action steps for conquering, because I think sometimes if we're not careful, we sit in that for a long time. We're burnout, or we're stressed, or we're whatever it may be. Okay, and as somebody like myself trying to support somebody that's in that stage, great. But we need to also turn some action. We got to think about how do we move forward on that, and that's really hard. But I think we owe it to ourselves to take steps to get us in a better spot. So sorry, that was a lot of information right there.
No, I
Those
think
are just
that's
two things
great.
that were on my mind.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on with layers, okay? Because we have so many facets to our lives. We have work, we have family, we have kids, grandkids, or even if you don't, you have other family members that need your help. Aging parents, you have grandparents, you have other family members that might need something. So it's a layered effect. One thing I notice with care, if we get burned out, we feel overly responsible for a lot. And so we have to check that part of ourselves that says it's my responsibility to take care of everything. Not to say it's not, that you don't have responsibilities, because you do. And we want to say, what are some of the limits that I might need to set on myself? Maybe it's volunteering. Like, okay, I want to volunteer, but yet if I take on one more thing, it's going to tip me over the edge. And so we have to say no to some things to say yes to having more energy and less stress. And so we look at am I getting enough sleep? Okay, I know this is so big.
Mhm.
If you're not getting enough sleep, you're more likely to head towards burnout, and your stress is going to live in your body. Sleep is essential. So I'm looking at how much caffeine are you consuming, how much alcohol are you consuming, how much are you consuming social media at night. We're all guilty of doing this doom scrolling. And how much is that affecting your burnout? Because you're not really replenishing anything, it's actually draining you. And so I'm looking at some of those things. Nutrition, like, okay, am I able to have enough energy to kind of get through my day? Because that affects how you're emotionally going to cope. Are you in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Fawning's that people pleasing part that says, I got to be everything to everyone. And that's a learned role. So if we want to go real deep, I'm also looking at family of origin work. What was your role in the family? Were you the kind of parentified child that had to take care of everything and take on a lot more? Maybe you had to watch your siblings. Maybe you had to kind of cook all the meals or do a lot at home. That's going to lead to burnout at a very young age. So I'm also looking at what role did you play in your family system, not to blame, but to create some insight in what might you be taking forward into your current life. So if you are the hero of the family, chances are that's a role you're going to keep taking on, and you're going to take on more than you can manage. Now, there's life circumstances where it's beyond your control. Okay, things happen. You've got to caretake someone. You've got to get the kids here and there, and so you've got to have a routine. You've got to have a schedule, and you might need to ask for help. And that's hard. That's vulnerable to ask for help or say, I'm not going to be able to do everything. Let's sit through the calendar and let me see let's go through who's doing what. And then here's what I might not be able to do. And would you be willing to take that on? These are vulnerable conversations. So, to your point, it's layered. It
Yeah.
looks like it's about maybe the current stress you have in your life, but what else is driving that underneath it? And so, do we have trauma that's unprocessed? Do we have, again, some childhood roles that you're carrying into today? Do we have this kind of, are you operating on adrenaline and that could be a trauma response? And are you afraid to say no? There's many variables that really contribute to burnout and stress, and we have to be open to exploring those parts of ourselves that we might have buried or suppressed.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's what, yeah, I think that openness is hard, right? That's a hard thing to identify. So, talk a little bit about those action steps a little bit more. I think, again, we kind of get stuck in social media plays into this, right? There's all sorts of memes and reels and all those things that help us identify what we're sitting in, which is great. But then, what obligation? Maybe that's not the right word, but what are those action steps, and what should we hold ourselves accountable to, maybe, on how to move the ball forward?
Couple of things. One, I'm gonna go to a radical way to present this. It's maybe a little different. I would say the number one thing is radical ownership of where you are, because what I see when couples come in or individuals, part of what we're working on is doing some self-reflection on, how did I get here? How did I get to this place? And we often will see, well, I scared to say no. I didn't really have a voice. I was scared to tell, like, really honestly how I felt. And they take that into relationships and couples, not saying how they really feel. And then they take this into the job, and then they're afraid something bad's going to happen. And we really work on being able to take kind of an inventory of, what am I bringing to the table? Because that's something we can work on. We're powerless over some things outside of ourselves, but that's where I can hold some of the self-reliancy to say, okay, what can I work on? That's first. Second, maybe is processing. I'm big into processing. We got to talk about it. And so maybe that's talking to, a therapist. Maybe that's going to a group. Maybe that's talking to a friend, or just starting to name how you're feeling with somebody. That's a big step for many, many people, because in family systems, we weren't allowed to share how we really felt. And so we're taking that with us and internalizing it into the body. And the next thing is, I really believe, to tackle burnout, we really need to decide, what can we handle and what can't we handle. And this is hard. Like, what is too much, and what am I going to have to say, this is my capacity, and I don't think I could take on anything else. And that I'm at max. I love to say I'm at max capacity. Like, this is what I can and can't do, which is harder in a job. And so we have to kind of finesse how we're going to go about communicating these things. And I work a lot with how to communicate in an effective way. And we love the acknowledgement sandwich. So we say, I love this job. And maybe you don't, but I really, really am grateful for the opportunity to work here. And you don't say but, because that's like taking an eraser. And I'm trying to figure out my capacity in this project. I'm excited about it. And these are the elements that I can do well. And these are the elements we might need to delegate or sub out, or I'm making this up.
Yeah.
And I'm welcoming your feedback, and I'm always willing to grow and learn. Boom.
Well, and I have found, even in the workplace too, and especially like in personal relationships, that asking for help is really hard. That acknowledgement sandwich is really hard. But I think, as humans, we are wired to want to help. And so I think, if you're willing to verbalize it, the other person sometimes just needs to know where you stand. We can't read minds. I always say, I can't read your mind. I was talking to some constituents this weekend that were upset about something, and what was I going to do about it? And I said, I appreciate that. I didn't even know this was an issue. I can't fix or help solve what I don't know about. You know what I mean? So I think, again, in a way, we owe it to ourselves and those around us that can control some of this burnout, to verbalize that. Is that a fair statement?
It is huge. And that's communication. And this sounds so cliche, and people are like, bah. It literally is the key to working through stress, burnout, relationship issues. We didn't learn how to do that effectively And I'm not blaming anybody, but we didn't. And so we don't know where to start. We don't know how to approach the conversation because we're so afraid of upsetting someone, something bad happening, they're getting mad, we're hurting someone else. And what we do is we end up stuck. So a lot of people are like, I'm so stuck. I'm like, okay, where do we have the pitfalls that we haven't told anybody? We haven't communicated anything. And that's scary to start but I will tell you, it's freedom and liberation once you learn how to start doing it. It is the key to getting unstuck.
Yeah.
No one else is going to solve it for you, but you're empowering yourself to be an advocate for yourself in a healthy way. You're not coming unglued. You're not yelling and screaming at somebody. You're doing it in a centered, responsible, authentic way. And
And you're giving others an opportunity to assist, right? And to help. I just started a practice not too long ago in our office where on Sunday night I usually email my senior team of like, hey, these are like 5 things on my mind right now. Like this is what's kind of percolating on my mind because I owe it to them to know what's bothering me. What's manifesting itself in me, and they may know information or be able to assist in certain things. But like being able to put that out there into the universe of like, this is what I'm struggling with. Now let's react and let's work together on it.
yeah, and that's huge. So if
Mhm.
you don't communicate, you're probably not going to shift what's
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah.
And so we think about it that way. Think about if I don't say anything, then what's going to change?
Yep.
It doesn't mean you're waiting for the other person to do something different. It's for you
Yeah.
to move the needle within yourself, to move it up and out.
Yep.
So I cannot emphasize the value of communication.
Yep.
And we know through research it is the number one, and it sounds cliche, but like behind self-awareness and taking responsibility is communication. I can't communicate if I haven't done some like self-reflection.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm going to communicate in a non potentially a harmful or unhealthy way.
Yep. I know we're kind of closing in on our time here a little bit, which goes by so fast, by the way. But I want to talk a little bit about. There's a lot of parents that tune in here, and they may hear burnout, and I think sometimes about our youth. I think about my kids and the amount my oldest son plays basketball, and burnout on some school subjects. And so I want to talk a little bit about identifying burnout in kids. Or young adults even, and then how as parents or caregivers, you may be a grandparent, you may be whatever that may be, a mentor. How do we help identify that maybe in that generation? And what does that communication look like for them?
So I think it's important that when we talk about burnout, we're also talking about emotions that are underneath it. So with kids in particular, maybe they have some shame around a particular subject. They're working real hard, but they're not quite getting it. They feel like I'm stupid. I'm not getting it. We all have had those feelings, right? Like I'm not good enough. I don't get this. We have to help children start identifying emotions. So what are you feeling? I'm feeling sad. Well, tell me about that. I'm angry at my teacher. Okay, tell me about that. I don't feel I feel stupid. That's shame. It's about self. So we have to start identifying emotions. It's one of the most important things in families that I can emphasize right now at this time. When we're on our phones, we're disconnected. When we put the phones down and we start getting curious about how they feel, and that's about, let's say, basketball, let's do a check-in. How you feeling about it? What's going well? What do you wish was different? What are you struggling with? What are some of the challenges? You don't need to do it all in one sitting, because if you're like barraging
Hmm.
with questions,
Hmm.
get curious about what emotionally is going on. Those emotional check-ins with kids really help with burnout. So if we're not processing it and we're just kind of going through the day-to-day life, it's going to build. It's like it's just getting buried.
Hmm.
What I work on is like, how can we unbury what's underneath that, where they feel stuck and maybe angry might be the way they come at it, or the dysregulation. I'm looking at what emotionally is going on. That may not be anything related to that subject. It may be something else going on. Like they don't feel like they have any friends, or they are struggling with, feeling left out, or someone posted something on social and they weren't invited. Chances are there's other layers, to your point originally. There's other pieces and components that are going on. So we do those emotional check-ins, and that looks like, how are you feeling? I love, what was your high today? What was your low? What all those
We do high low weird.
Yes. And I'm telling you, there's so much value and it's never too late. So if you're like, well, I didn't do that with my kids, start now.
Mhm.
If you come to our house, you're like, oh, Kristen's doing her. I'm like, we're going to emotionally connect. Now, some people might not be available for that, but
Mhm.
I prioritize getting curious about deeper conversations. And
Mhm.
some people are uncomfortable and they don't have to participate. You want to hold sacred space for us to collectively work through stress and all these pieces and parts of life that we're all facing. What a beautiful gift to create a healthy, safe place for us to say, come as you are, share how you feel, and let's talk about it. Let's go there.
Yeah, if you don't want to share your feelings or go deeper, probably avoid Kristen, Boyce, and myself because I ask a lot of questions. I was just at a camp this weekend with my son and out in the woods. That's why I was drinking an emergency, by the way. That's why that was a yellow thing. I'm trying to just get myself through the day. But I always ask the dads that were there. Was a bunch of dads and kids. Like I want to drill deeper, and then I get myself in like a 20-minute conversation. Like, oh, shouldn't have asked these questions. You know what I mean? But like, if you, I'm gonna go deep with you. I'm gonna ask those questions.
'Cause
So.
you're leading with curiosity.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
think
100%.
that is a great gift that can help with burnout. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, in stress, lead with curiosity. Now, you might not have capacity sometimes. That's okay. Then you don't
Yeah.
need to be asking those questions
Yeah.
and getting curious about yourself.
Yeah.
It's so important. Then we create a curiosity in our kids and our families and our friendships, and we allow that to have a deeper rumble than just how's the weather today?
Yeah. What I have found that sometimes people just need to verbalize it. They need to tell somebody what's going on in their life, and and that's part of it. Let that speak happen. It's a great gift you can give people.
It's one of the greatest
Yeah.
gifts. I
Yeah.
truly believe that.
Yeah. So we're wrapping up here. I have like 2 minutes left. You want to give a few pointers on dealing with burnout, or maybe the difference between burnout and stress?
Okay, stress lives in the body. Burnout's a concept. Okay, it's a feeling. Stress actually has physiological components to it. So if stress impacts the body, we know this. I mean, people that are, marathon runners and they're doing all these things, but then they have physical ailments. Yes, there's genetics and other factors. I'm not saying it's a black and white issue. But what I'm saying is stress lives in the body. And so physiologically, we need to pay attention to our bodies. It's a tell. I have a friend that when her eye gets a certain way, she knows she's stressed out, she's not eating correctly. She knows that her body's giving her information. Pay attention. Stress lives in the body. That's what I want to emphasize. Burnout is more that mental, emotional exhaustion, and where you're like, I don't find purpose and meaning in my life. I don't find purpose at work. I feel just kind of like I'm going through the motions, but I'm exhausted. It's a concept to people to name, like when they feel like they're shutting down. Like I'm just kind of shutting down and I'm not getting any joy out of life. But stress definitely lives in the body. So we want to decipher between the two. Burnout does, but burnout's connected to stress. It's like burnout is chronic stress. Okay. And that's why we're not finding any joy and we're shutting down.
Well, that's why I wanted to point out that there are some differences there between the two, but they are related at the same time.
They're
So.
interconnected.
Yes. Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I always end it with if someone is feeling stressed or burnout and has nowhere to go, where do they go?
988. I'm telling you, 988 is great. We also have local emergency rooms that have mental health facilities connected to them. But 988, you can call or text 24/7. And I want to tell all the students out there that don't know about it, use it. Like if you don't know what to do, you're struggling yourself with suicidal thoughts, do not hesitate to use that. There are trained clinicians on the other side that want to walk you and support you through it because you matter, you're important, you're loved, and you're enough. But that shame tells you a different story.
And they are there to walk alongside you. They want to do that. I think that is an important part. So, Kristen Boyce, as always, you are the best. Thank you for giving your time, talents, and treasures to us today on a wonderful edition of Mental Health Monday. And we will look forward to seeing everyone back here next month as we tackle a new topic. But in the meantime, enjoy the cooler weather, Kristen Boyce.
Thank you. Thanks
All
for
right.
tuning in.
See you soon. Boom. That's
Boom.
great.